This is the old Ottoman Empire, all in that dark brown. And you can see how large it is, how big it is. After World War I, when the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Turks, they sided with Germany, and so they lost their empire, essentially. The French and the British came in, as well as the Americans, but mostly the Brits and the French came in and carved it up and created the modern-day states that we see today of, here they are right here, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Iraq. 5 states, and some of them were ruled by the Hashemite kings. Jordan, Syria, and Iraq were all ruled by the Hashemite kings. Hashemites were the direct descendants of Muhammad, which is why they did this. But let's go back to slide 1. What people don't understand is these nations were just created from 1917. They were part of the Ottoman Empire and had been so for about 400 years. So now you get these people, the Brits and the French, who don't understand the ethnicity and really the difference between Sunni and Shia and all this other stuff, and they create these modern nations that we see here. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and of course Israel. 1948 becomes a nation. This goes back into a two-state solution. So what I want to get into here is for those of you who say, and there are a lot of people who say this, that Israel has no right to the land, blah, 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 blah. Let's be fair. If Israel has no right to the land, then these modern nations that we see have no right to the land either, because it's all under or was under Ottoman rule. Syria was ruled by the Hashemite kings. They were also deposed, and now we've got Bashar al-Assad clinging on to power. In Jordan, the king of Jordan is still a Hashemite king, and that's the only Hashemite kingdom that is left. So the conflict comes down to, who are the Palestinians? Well, there are no Palestinian people. There is no Palestinian language. Palestinians are just another group of Arabs. I mean, there's no genetic markers that would signal that these are Palestinian. They're Arabs is what they are. And so when Israel declared its independence, these Arab nations went in and attacked Israel from several sites.
Of course, this begs the question, when has there ever been a nation of Palestine? When has it ever existed? That land before Israel was established legally by the United Nations had been Jordanian. The Jordanians seized it with the UN partition. Before that, it was British. Before it was British, it was Ottoman Turk. When has a Palestinian state ever existed? How can you occupy a country that never existed? No one answers that question. Archaeology proves categorically the historicity of the scripture of both the Old and New Testament, that the Jews are the indigenous people of that land, says archaeology. You don't have to believe in the scriptures to understand that the scriptures are historically accurate. Archaeology verifies it. How can an indigenous people occupy a country? As we always say, Apaches cannot occupy Arizona. Maoris cannot occupy New Zealand. Aboriginal Australians cannot occupy Australia. And indigenous people cannot, by definition, be considered to be an occupying power, unless, of course, they are a Jew. Let's begin at the beginning, which is a good place to begin. In the 2nd century AD, Common Era, the Romans renamed the land Palestine, which is simply a Latinization of Philistine, the ancient enemies of the Hebrews. However, the Philistines, from the time of King David and so forth, have not existed in well over 2,500 years. They were Indo-European people who were from Crete, essentially. We know that they worship the fish god Dagon and so forth. So there is no such thing as an ethnic Palestinian alive on the face of the earth. They're simply people who inhabit the same area. However, let's go back to the British Mandate. The first name of the Israeli National Philharmonic Orchestra was the Palestine Philharmonic Orchestra. The name of the Jerusalem Post newspaper, the English-speaking newspaper of Israel, was originally the Palestine Post. Palestine had nothing to do with Arab or Islamic identity. It was purely geographical of anybody who lived under the British mandate. There were 30,000 Jewish soldiers who fought in the British Army under Montgomery in the Second World War who had a patch, 30,000. They were called the British Palestine Legion, and every one of them was a Jew. Well, what happened? In the Gaza Strip, Gaza was controlled by Nasser, by the Egyptians, up till 1967. In the 1967 war, in the Six-Day War, the Israelis were forced to conquer it in self-defense from the Egyptians. The Israelis tried to give it back with the Camp David Accords to the Egyptians, and Anwar Sadat didn't want it. Well, the West Bank, now calling themselves Palestinians, that was grabbed in the late 1940s by the Jordanians. Those people were known as Jordanians. In 1967, when Israel conquered the West Bank, they conquered the West Bank of the Jordan. The Arabs living there were called Jordanians. All of them were called Jordanians. It was not until Black September in 1970, Yasser Arafat said that Jordan is Palestine, and King Hussein of Jordan said that Palestine is Jordan. They admitted it, that there already was a two-state solution. Jordan was the Palestinian state, howbeit with a Hashemite Bedouin government. Well, Arafat tried to take over Jordan in 1970, in September of 1970. King Hussein of Jordan, who I actually met once when I was 15 in Virginia, he was trained by the British at Sandhurst Military Academy. That's like the West Point of Great Britain. He was educated in military arts and sciences and military strategy. In a period of 12 days, he systematically massacred, not wounded, massacred, killed between 15 and 18,000 so-called Palestinian Arabs in 12 days. After that, the Tooth Fairy came and appeared over the West Bank and waved the magic wand. And although they went to bed as Jordanians, the next day they woke up as Palestinians. A miracle happened. And this myth has been propagated ever since. We are also reminded of certain other facts. One, from 1948, from the UN partition in May of 1948 until 1967, June, nearly 20 years, over 19 years, nearly 20 years. Gaza, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem were all uniformly under the control of Arab Muslims. If they wanted another Arab Muslim state called Palestine, in addition to the one that they said already existed in Jordan, if they wanted a third one, why didn't they just make one when they had nearly 20 years to do it? It was never an issue. It is all revisionism. It is all a lie. Jordan was Palestine. Who said so? The League of Nations, the United Nations, the British government, the Jordanian government, and the Palestinian Liberation Organization of Yasser Arafat. They all said it. The next thing they will not tell you is the civil war between the Palestinians themselves in Lebanon, which was a bloodbath among bloodbaths. Neither will they tell you about the civil war in Gaza, in which 8,000 so-called Palestinian Arabs were killed by other Palestinian Arabs when Hamas fought the Palestinian Authority, now headed by Mahmoud Abbas. The civil wars they've had among themselves have killed a lot more. As it says in the book of Genesis, Ishmael's seed will always be divided. Esau's sword will be against his brother. They need the common enemy of the Christian and the Jew. Otherwise, they will kill each other. Most jihads are Muslims killing Muslims. These are the realities of Palestinian nationalism. It is contrived. It is made up. It never existed until after 1970. It never existed in the sense it does now until after 1970. Palestinian had to do with geography. It did not have to do with any Arab ethnicity. Nothing. One further thing. Twice, once most notably with Mahmoud Abbas and once most notably at Whitewater, Yasser Arafat was offered another so-called Palestinian Arab state on the West Bank and Gaza. He was offered it by Ehud Barak, and he turned it down in favor of jihad when they went on the bombing spree, killing thousands of Israelis. He was offered it, and he turned it down. Hamas does not want a two-state solution. You want a two-state solution? There's always been one. Jordan is a Palestinian state, said the Arabs. Now they want a three-state solution. No, they want a four-state solution because the Palestinian Authority controls the West Bank and Hamas controls Gaza. So now you're up to a four-state solution. But in fact, they want a one-state solution from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, from the river to the sea. The fact that archaeology proves the historicity of the biblical record in both testaments, that the Jews are the indigenous people, do not matter. You cannot make peace with people like this. You can only make war with people like this because they're going to make war with you.